That Christmas, when I heard the words my own daughter threw at me, I felt the world crumble at my feet. Before I continue, please subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell because we have new stories every day. Leave a like and tell us in the comments which city you're watching from. My name is Arthur Miller. I'm 70 years old, and I've spent my entire life building a legacy I never imagined would be threatened by the ones I loved most. This is the story of how my family became the greatest maze I've ever faced, and how I discovered that betrayal can come from the most unexpected hand. I remember that cold December night in 2009 when at our family gathering, what should have been the warmest celebration of the year, the air grew thick, heavy with shifty glances and words that cut through the silence like knives. Liam, my oldest son, and Chloe, his wife, who had always seemed like my allies, began to show their true colors. The conversation started with subtle questions about my decisions regarding the assets and the company I had worked so hard to build from scratch. But little by little, those questions turned into veiled commands and complaints disguised as fake concern. Their goal was clear to me: to silence my voice and take over what I had built with my own hands. As they spoke, Eleanor, my younger daughter, remained silent, her face serious and distant, a shadow of the woman who once trusted me completely. The tension grew, and with every minute, I felt the weight of betrayal become more unbearable. I could clearly hear Liam suggesting that I was no longer fit to manage my own affairs, and that perhaps it was time to consider someone else to take control. In that moment, a mix of outrage and sadness washed over me, but I tried to stay strong, not allowing tears to cloud my judgment. That night, I realized I had to prepare myself to face an unexpected enemy. An enemy living in the same house as me, under the same roof that had watched my children grow. The battle for my dignity and my legacy was about to begin, and I couldn't afford to misstep. While everyone talked, I listened carefully, remembering every word, every gesture, because I knew that from that moment on, nothing would ever be the same. It wasn't just a dispute over money. It was a fight for the respect and love I once thought I would receive unconditionally. The winter cold that blanketed that Christmas was reflected in every glance and every awkward silence. But in my heart, I held a flame of hope and determination that would never be extinguished. This story is the confession of a man who, despite being struck by family betrayal, decided to stand up and fight, not just for his fortune, but for his right to be respected as a father, a grandfather, and a human being. Here is where my story begins. I remember in detail that time when family was a safe haven, a port where storms seemed to stay in the distance. In those moments, anything seemed possible, and the bond between us shone with hope. Thinking about those days makes me understand even more the depth of the abyss we found ourselves in. When I looked at my young children, I saw in their eyes the reflection of my dreams, the promise of a better life, born from the perseverance and sacrifice that marked every year of work, every sleepless night, every challenge overcome. It was impossible to imagine that decades later, those same bonds would be stretched to the breaking point by ambition and hidden misunderstandings. Liam, my firstborn, had always been brave and determined. His strong, ambitious character pushed him to take an active role in the family business from a young age. I remember his first days working by my side, learning to deal with business and responsibilities, and how a relationship of mutual respect was built, or so I thought. Eleanor, My younger daughter was different, more reserved, less confrontational, but just as intelligent and sensitive. With her, I shared long, deep conversations, even dreams and worries that I confided only in her. It was in those years that I felt the family was whole, that no wind could knock down the castle we had slowly built. But like the thin mist that signals a storm, small cracks began to appear. Sporadic arguments about money, disagreements on business decisions, and silences that grew longer and longer. That memory mixes with the scene after that hellish Christmas, when the silence in the house was disturbing. Forced smiles gave way to evasive looks, and any attempt to restore harmony seemed futile. Despite my insistence on dialogue, I felt like a stranger in my own home, isolated in a bubble of misunderstanding and resentment. Deep down, I thought that maybe it wasn't just about material possessions. Beyond the money, the inheritance, or the fortune, there were unhealed emotional wounds, unspoken frustrations that had been undermining the trust and love between us. I began to remember past moments, almost with nostalgia, trying to understand what had really changed, when affection had turned into a minefield where every step could mean an explosion. Memories of long-forgotten conversations came back to me. Half-finished sentences, unkept promises, decisions made without consensus that had poisoned our life together. Even small gestures, tiny details of indifference or disdain that I had let pass without a thought, but which I now understood were unmistakable signs of a brewing danger. That growing sense of confusion led me to analyze my relationship with Liam and Chloe more closely. They were driven by a relentless ambition that had lain dormant, perfecting strategies to snatch control of what I had worked so hard to protect. On the other hand, Eleanor seemed to hesitate, caught in an internal conflict, torn between loyalty to her family and respect for her father. I miss the times when decisions were made together, when the family sat around the table without hiding resentments or faking friendships. Now distrust had enthroned itself in our hearts, and every word seemed to carry a weight too heavy to bear. However, in the midst of this emotional storm, I also found motivation. The certainty that I had to defend not only my assets, but also my dignity, and the memory of years invested in giving them a decent future. And that's when I started to notice those little details, those almost imperceptible clues that foretold what was to come. The hidden phone calls, the discreet meetings, the deleted messages, the hastily reviewed documents, everything indicated that the assault on my legacy was underway. Although my heart ached with each discovery, my mind remained sharp and cold, determined to protect what I considered just and not to go down without a fight. That period of introspection and analysis was the beginning of a new phase in my life. I went from being a man who trusted his family to a strategist who had to navigate complex paths with caution and determination. Acknowledging the betrayal was the first step to finding my way back and preparing every necessary move to face the battle I could no longer ignore. Memory became my ally. Every detail, every small gesture helped build a map that would guide my defense. In the silence of my thoughts, there was also room for deep sadness over the breakdown of blood ties and affection I thought were unbreakable. But beyond the pain, an inner flame began to grow, a force that pushed me toward action. It was then that I knew nothing would ever be the same, but that I still had time to write a new story for myself and for those who truly deserved my trust. That's why hope began to peek through the shadows, driving me forward with the strength that only comes from the road traveled and the experience gained over so many years. In this new chapter, I want to share today, introspection and vigilance became my best weapons. And although the future seemed uncertain and full of obstacles, I was ready to face every challenge with the firmness of someone who has learned to get up after falling. This is the story of my memories, of that painful transition between lost innocence and the struggle to keep dignity alive amidst the darkness that loomed over my family. A journey that was just beginning, and that would lead me to discover how far love can go when faced with betrayal and boundless ambition. During those days after Christmas, the atmosphere in the house grew even more tense, filled with omens and uncomfortable silences. It seemed as if every corner held a secret, and every object had a story to tell, something that had remained hidden until then. But what I perhaps never imagined was that the real blow would come disguised as seemingly harmless documents and papers. One afternoon, while looking through some old files in my study, I stumbled upon a folder I didn't remember leaving on the desk. Curiosity made me open it, and I was shocked to find a bank document with my forged signature, accompanied by a power of attorney that gave Liam absolute control over my accounts and properties. It couldn't be true, and yet there it was, like a dagger stuck in the heart of my life. As I read the text carefully, I understood that Liam and Chloe had been planning their assault for a long time. It wasn't just a verbal dispute or a family disagreement, but a genuine plot to strip me of my autonomy and relegate me to the background, or worse, to push me into absolute dependence on those who sought to benefit at my expense. The feeling of disbelief was quickly replaced by a mix of contained anger and a new determination. I couldn't let this betrayal go unpunished, nor let my story end up thrown into oblivion by the boundless ambitions of my own blood. It was then that I decided something had to change, that the only way to defeat those attacking me was with a solid defense and a well-thought-out strategy. The reality surpassed any nightmare I could have imagined, and the feeling of vulnerability that overwhelmed me was mixed with the clarity needed to act with a cool head. So I secretly contacted Ann Peterson, a trusted lawyer and friend, whose experience in family and inheritance law would be key to facing this battle that was just beginning. During our first meetings, I detailed every finding, every suspicion, and she meticulously helped me understand the extent of the damage and the legal avenues we could use to protect my interests. Anne taught me the importance of documenting every move, of staying calm in the face of any provocation, and of preparing a robust case that left no room for doubt or manipulation. At the same time, I started paying attention to the small details of daily life, the hastily deleted text messages, the phone calls at unusual hours, the half-heard arguments behind closed doors that became secrets shared only with Chloe or some close associates. Everything seemed orchestrated with precision and coldness, typical of a calculated plan without remorse. This revelation made me look even further into the past, trying to piece together the web that had allowed these intentions to grow to such an extent. It wasn't just a matter of inheritance or money, but about honor and fundamental rights that could not be violated. That conviction allowed me to endure the darkest moments, when the thought of surrender crossed my mind and despair threatened to paralyze me. By then the days grew long and the nights more difficult, but I never strayed from the search for the truth. Every conversation, every new document reinforced my decision and fueled my spirit to keep going, despite the constant touches of uncertainty that surrounded my life. It was also during that time that I noticed a subtle change in Eleanor. She began to approach me with fleeting questions and comments, showing a different kind of concern than her usual indifference. Despite this timid approach, I felt that the rift between us was deep, and that there was still a long way to go to restore any kind of trust. Meanwhile, Liam and Chloe continued their moves in the shadows, avoiding direct confrontations, but being aggressive enough in their manipulation of circumstances. Their strategy was clear: to wear me down, demobilize me, and use any resource to gain the necessary advantage in the looming legal process. With Anne's help, I strengthened my position, learning to read every sign and anticipate every move of those who intended to take control of my life. Every small victory, every recovered document, represented a drop of justice in a sea of injustice. Thus, amidst memories, betrayals, and meticulous plans, I became aware that the real battle was being fought not only in law offices, but within myself, where the strength to remain whole and the patience to wait for the right moment were essential. That phase of discovery and preparation marked the formal beginning of the defense of my dignity. There would be no more room for doubts or falsehoods. The path was illuminated by the clarity of truth and the unwavering conviction that, no matter how difficult the fight, it was worth fighting to the very end. During those months, I also realized that betrayal hurts less when faced with knowledge and well-founded strategies, and that family, although sometimes the source of the deepest wounds, can also be rebuilt from the rubble if there is will and mutual respect. That stage was a test of endurance, marked by moments of absolute tension and others of deep reflection, where the balance between emotion and reason was key to moving forward. And although the future looked uncertain and full of obstacles, my firm step and the evidence I was accumulating gave me hope that justice would prevail and that the damage could be limited. The fight was just beginning, but I was ready to face it with all the strength I had accumulated throughout my life, without giving up my dignity or allowing fear to direct me. So, with a renewed spirit and a sharp mind, I threw myself into the battle that defined not only my assets, but the very essence of my legacy and the hope of reconciliation for those who remained by my side. Over the following weeks, the shadow of betrayal became more apparent, but a light also began to emerge in the darkness, thanks to the unconditional support of Anne Peterson, a lawyer whose reputation and dedication gave me the hope I needed to face that family storm. Anne was not only an expert in inheritance law, but she also perfectly understood the emotional complexity involved in a dispute between loved ones. From our first meeting, she established a clear and meticulous strategy, reminding me of the importance of acting with precision and patience to avoid mistakes that could jeopardize my defense. With her, we exhaustively reviewed every document, every contract, every signature, to identify any irregularity or evidence that supported my claim. I also confided in her all the details I had discovered about Liam and Chloe's maneuvers, including the fraudulent powers of attorney and suspicious movements in the bank accounts. One of the first tasks was to freeze the joint accounts I shared with Liam, as the irresponsible management and transfers without my consent were a direct and imminent threat. Anne immediately handled the necessary legal measures to ensure that no transaction could be made without my express authorization. At the same time, we began to prepare a thorough review of the will and all papers related to the inheritance, with the aim of ensuring that my wishes were reflected clearly and unequivocally, leaving no room for ambiguous interpretations that could be exploited. Every decision we made was accompanied not only by rigorous legal analysis, but also by careful consideration of the family dynamics. Anne understood that this battle was not only won in a courtroom, but also on the invisible ground of respect and dignity that I had to preserve. Meanwhile, in my closest circle, Eleanor's presence became more constant. Despite the wounds that distanced us, her changing attitude showed signs that there was still something left of the bond that had once united us so strongly. She tried to get closer, and although the years of silence had created walls that were difficult to break down, she seemed willing to rebuild a path. However, Liam and Chloe responded to each of our moves with greater aggression, moving quickly to secure their position. The calls and messages intercepted by Anne and me revealed a complex network, a web of influences and contacts they used to gain ground in this ruthless dispute. In the midst of this scenario, I decided to remain calm and serene, because I knew that giving in to anger or despair would only lead me to lose the clarity needed to act correctly. Time became an ally. And with Anne by my side, I learned to see each step forward as a crucial piece for the final victory. We also arranged meetings with notaries and doctors who could certify my mental and physical state, as one of my adversary's tactics was to claim I was supposedly incapable of managing my assets. It was essential to anticipate this attack and be prepared with solid testimonies that would guarantee my will would be respected without question. The days turned into continuous tasks of review, consultations, and decisions. Often, when my strength waned, I remembered that this fight was not only for my financial legacy, but for the justice, respect, and dignity I deserved to maintain until the very end. Anne became more than a lawyer. She was a strategic and emotional ally, helping me navigate a swampy and treacherous terrain. Her ability to anticipate moves and her exhaustive knowledge of the law were fundamental in building a solid case that left no room for double interpretations. With each document collected and each step taken, I felt I was regaining the control they had tried to snatch from me. The threats and shadows were still present, but the certainty of being protected gave me the strength to keep going and to face any obstacle that might still appear. In family gatherings, the atmosphere became increasingly tense. Liam tried to project an image of respect and concern, but behind those appearances hid a voracious desire for power. Chloe, for her part, played an almost theatrical role, a mix of victim and cold strategist who cleverly manipulated those around her. In contrast, Eleanor began to raise her voice in defense of my rights, a gesture that, although small, symbolized that there was still room for reconciliation and for recovering what seemed lost. Her change was a light in the middle of the dark landscape that had become of our relationship. Meanwhile, the house that was once a refuge turned into a kind of personal fortress, where every measure taken and every closed door represented steps towards protecting my life and my assets. Although the legal battle was intense and exhausting, it also allowed me to strengthen my bond with those who truly valued what was just and legitimate. I soon understood that beyond everything, this fight taught me who my true allies were, and which family truly deserved my love and protection. The work with Anne progressed at a good pace, and with each step, I became more convinced that maintaining serenity and strategy was the key to overcoming a conflict that demanded strength and patience, two qualities I had learned to cultivate with great effort throughout my life. Ultimately, this stage marked a before and after in my defense. I felt prepared, confident, and determined to face any attempt to undermine my authority, because I knew that value was not in money or property, but in the respect and justice I had to recover for myself and for my worthy family. The days grew long and complex, marked by meticulous and constant work, reorganizing my life and my assets to shield them from the attacks of those trying to take them from me. With the help of Ann Peterson, we began a deep process of reviewing and updating documents, wills, powers of attorney, and deeds, all with the clear objective of ensuring that my will and control over my assets were irrevocably protected. For weeks, we sat in the office surrounded by piles of papers and files, examining every detail with the precision of a surgeon. It wasn't just about checking signatures or dates, but about understanding the legal and emotional consequences of each decision, trying to anticipate any possible maneuver that Liam or Chloe might make, and patiently explain the implications of each clause, adapting the language of the documents to prevent false interpretations or legal loopholes. We made an exhaustive inventory of all the properties, from the estates I still owned in the countryside to the city apartments and the bank accounts I held in my name. For each one, we clearly defined who the legitimate beneficiaries would be. I knew the importance of not leaving any loose ends, as every tiny crack could be used against me. That's why we reviewed every financial note, every pending contract, every signed document in detail to have a complete and invulnerable picture. Anne recommended implementing additional measures to freeze certain joint accounts, especially those where Liam had broad and unrestricted access. It was a tedious bureaucratic process, but necessary to preserve economic stability. The fear that they would make unexpected moves or transfers without consent kept me on alert. And although I couldn't fully trust them, I knew the law was on my side if I acted firmly and within legal parameters. In addition, we began to work on the new testamentary provisions. We reasoned about who deserved to be included based on their demonstrated respect and support, and who should be excluded for clear and justifiable reasons. This decision was not easy, but the betrayal and damage caused left little room for trust. Anne handled the process with sensitivity so that everything was recorded clearly and definitively. I decided to impose strict conditions so that any family member who wanted to remain in the family home would have to accept in writing a commitment to respect and participate in family therapy sessions. It was necessary to establish firm boundaries to prevent old, destructive dynamics from continuing to wreak havoc on our life together. For me, the house had to be a refuge, not an endless battlefield. Eleanor was the first to accept these proposals, showing a sincere interest in healing our wounds and building bridges. Liam and Chloe, on the other hand, rejected any kind of commitment that involved giving up their claims or submitting to external evaluations. Their defiant and arrogant attitude only reaffirmed my need to stand firm in my position and not yield to cruel pressures. In parallel, Anne coordinated with medical and psychological experts who prepared professional reports to prove conclusively that I was in full possession of my mental faculties. This was vital to counteract the false accusations of incapacity they had promoted without any real basis. The reports not only certified my condition, but also highlighted my mental clarity and decision-making ability, dismantling my detractors' strategy. The looming legal battle would not only be fought in court, but also in an arena where truth and respect would be the main weapons. That's why every gesture, every signature, every decision was accompanied by the deep conviction that justice was on my side, as long as I continued with integrity and firmness. It was an exhausting and challenging process that forced me to balance emotional resilience with the need to act with intelligence. Strategic agency. Despite the difficulties, I felt that every small step forward was a personal victory, a step towards the comprehensive defense of everything I had built throughout my life. The renewal of documents gave me back something valuable I had felt was lost: control over my destiny, and the security that no one could manipulate me or take away what was rightfully mine. The weight of the battle became less unbearable when I had legal backing, when reason and respect began to balance the scales that had been tipped by ambition. Despite the physical and emotional toll, the learning this process gave me was invaluable. I discovered that strength lies not only in blind resistance, but also in the wisdom of knowing when to adjust course and how to focus efforts with precision. Those were days when every administrative detail had a much deeper meaning: the defense of my own identity and dignity. While Anne and I reorganized my assets, a part of me also prepared to face the personal repercussions of those decisions. I knew that with every name excluded from the will, a rift would open in the family, and that the price to pay would be high. But that was an inevitable consequence when ties had been torn by greed and lack of respect. I felt that, little by little, I was regaining lost ground, paving the way towards a future where justice and balance would prevail. With every signed document, with every legal barrier put in place, I got closer to that ideal of peace I so longed for those who truly valued and respected their father and grandfather. I knew there were many obstacles ahead, but I also knew I had made the right decisions to get there. Reconstruction was possible only if I maintained firmness, integrity, and hope intact in the midst of a hostile and complex environment. Ultimately, this stage became the cornerstone of the legal defense that would define the course of the family war. And although the future was still full of uncertainties, I felt prepared to move forward, aware that it was not just a confrontation over material goods, but the restoration of the honor and dignity I deserve as a father and a man. Those months were a profound lesson on the power of strategy, the importance of patience, and the need to hold on to the truth, even when the world seemed to be against you. Thanks to that determination and Anne's unconditional support, I finally began to see a hopeful light on the path to the justice I sought. The first signs of a possible reconciliation emerged in the most unexpected way. Eleanor, who had long maintained a distant and reserved stance, began to show a genuine interest in getting closer to me, breaking through the wall of silence that had separated us for years. Her attitude, at first timid and full of doubts, gradually took shape, showing a clear will to repair the damage and reestablish some kind of bridge. It was not a simple or linear process. The open wounds required space and time to heal, and each conversation involved a mix of conflicting emotions: guilt, regret, hope, and the fear of repeating past mistakes. Eleanor confessed to me with tears in her eyes how difficult it had been for her to see our relationship deteriorate, and how she felt trapped between loyalty to me and the influence of her brother and his wife. Her sincerity was an unexpected balm that allowed me to consider the possibility of family reconstruction, although always with caution and the awareness that not all wounds would close immediately. For me, this opening represented an encouraging sign amidst the climate of distrust that the battle for the inheritance had generated. We continued to talk at different times and in different places. During these talks, Eleanor expressed her desire not only to repair what was broken, but also to take a more protective and mature stance regarding the family. She accepted the proposal to participate in family therapy sessions, which for me was a fundamental step towards change, not only in our relationships, but in the very structure that held the family unit together. Meanwhile, Anne's presence continued to be an essential pillar in the legal strategy we maintained. Although the legal battle was progressing firmly, every advance on the family front had the power to balance emotions and create spaces for understanding that previously seemed impossible. The alliance between legal and human forces proved to be the most effective combination to sustain the hope of a just and peaceful outcome. Liam and Chloe, for their part, reacted to these movements with a mix of disdain and veiled attacks. They tried to discredit every conciliatory gesture from Eleanor, portraying her as weak or manipulated. However, my daughter's determination was unwavering, and little by little, she began to gain ground as an independent voice within the violent web that had been established in our family. With Eleanor, I also shared memories and emotions I thought were buried forever. We talked about my history, my efforts, and the internal struggles I had faced to protect our legacy. She listened attentively, and her responses showed a deeper understanding, a renewed respect that strengthened our relationship and created a more solid foundation for what we wanted to build together. The group therapy sessions were challenging because each member brought their own burden of resentments and frustrations. But it was in those moments of shared vulnerability that a clearer sense of coexistence and commitment began to germinate. We understood that to move forward, it was essential to accept our differences without them becoming destructive weapons. Far from being a quick process, these experiences were a source of important lessons, both for me and for Eleanor, and later for other members who wanted to join when they saw the positive effect of the change. The house, once a scene of tensions and confrontations, began to transform into a space where respect and patience took center stage. Meanwhile, I continued to monitor Liam and Chloe's maneuvers, aware that although Eleanor was showing a different path, they were not going to give up their original intentions so easily. This duality kept the situation complex, but it also gave me the strength to continue strengthening myself and trusting that time and justice would recognize those who truly valued the truth. The daily tasks of organizing documents, planning legal moves, and attending to every detail did not diminish. But the emotional support that began to return with Eleanor's approach provided a necessary balance to face the harshness of the battle. Knowing that I was not completely alone reinforced my spirit and allowed me to maintain a broad and clear vision. The evolution of our relationship taught me that although betrayal can hurt deeply, the possibility of redemption and forgiveness is always present, even if it is through slow and determined steps. I learned to value the effort involved in looking forward and rebuilding what seemed lost. Within this dynamic, I also began to trust my own abilities more, not only as a patriarch, but as a man seeking justice and understanding in the midst of adverse circumstances. The fight remained tough, but the change in Eleanor's attitude made a real difference in the course of events. Little by little, we determined by mutual agreement new rules and agreements that would allow us to coexist in a healthier environment where dialogue and respect spoke loudly. This included the condition that Liam and Chloe respect certain family rules and accept, even tacitly, that their strategies would not work. This step marked a significant advance in the reconstruction of broken relationships, although it was clear that not everyone would choose the path of reconciliation. For me, it was essential to protect those who spoke with truth and showed real closeness, and to prepare for whatever might come from those who chose to continue the conflict. Eleanor's will was the first beacon in the dark tunnel that our life together had become, and her every small gesture reaffirmed the hope that there could still be a possibility of restoring the family fabric damaged for so long. Thus, in the midst of a legal and emotional battle, Eleanor's openness to truth and dialogue became a relief and a motivation to continue fighting for what I always wanted: a united, just, and respectful family where love can prevail over greed and confrontation. The atmosphere in the house became unbearable when the legal battle I was waging with Liam and Chloe reached its peak. The tranquility that had begun to emerge with Eleanor's approach was quickly overshadowed by Liam's intention to take the dispute to court, launching accusations that questioned my ability to make decisions and manage my assets. It was a cruel accusation, based on lies and unfounded suspicions, but perfectly calculated to sow doubt and further divide the family. Faced with this situation, Anne and I had to strengthen our defense, gathering compelling evidence and preparing testimonies that could prove my position was not only coherent, but also sound and legitimate. The judicial process became a battlefield where every word, every document, and every gesture was analyzed with a magnifying glass. There was no room for error. The days turned into almost endless preparation sessions, where the pressure was intense, but where courage and determination also grew. Liam and Chloe's accusations went far beyond questioning my mental state. They hinted at supposed emotional abuse and manipulation, trying to tarnish my reputation and break the bonds with those who truly supported me. It was a low blow that affected not only my honor, but also the fragile daily coexistence. Fortunately, I had the support of medical and psychological professionals who, through exhaustive evaluations, certified my full competence and emotional stability. These reports became key pieces of our strategy, dismantling each of the accusations with the solidity of science and truth. The court listened attentively, and justice acted impartially, recognizing not only the evidence presented, but also the clear interest I had in preserving family integrity and avoiding greater harm to those who, like my grandchildren, depended on a stable and safe environment. The moments of tension during the hearings were unbearable, but every restrained reaction, every thoughtful argument, allowed me to hold my head high and face with dignity those who sought to dispossess me. Facing that legal war was not just a necessity, but an act of love and protection towards my legacy and those who deserve to preserve it. As the process unfolded, the house became a refuge where emotional abysses coexisted with sparks of hope, especially when the presence of my grandchildren brought a renewed dose of life and joy. They were the real engine for not giving up, the reason to continue resisting every attack. Eleanor remained a fundamental pillar, actively participating, supporting without reservation, and showing a coherence that contrasted sharply with the belligerent attitude of her brother and his wife. Her commitment to truth and respect strengthened me and made me believe in the possibility of a different future. Chloe, for her part, intensified her campaign to discredit me, dirtying my name with lies and false accusations, but her strategy showed evident cracks as irrefutable evidence was revealed. The battle was not only fought in the courts, but also on the invisible ground of honor and ethics, where the truth finally began to prevail. In parallel, I strengthened my ties with friends and external allies who provided moral support and knowledge, forming a solid front that, along with legal actions, constituted a true protective network. I understood that in these situations, it is essential to have an environment of support and trust, where every step is accompanied by understanding and strength. The most difficult moments coincided with those when the effort seemed futile, when the attacks seemed endless, and uncertainty took hold of my spirit. But it was precisely in those moments that the conviction that I was not fighting only for my benefit, but for an honest legacy and a dignified future for my grandchildren kept me on my feet. The court sessions extended over several months, each with its own load of emotions and challenges. However, justice gradually began to take a clear stance, rigorously and objectively evaluating each piece of evidence presented and rejecting the evidence built on lies and manipulations. That phase became a clear demonstration that strength lies not only in physical force or economic power, but in moral integrity and the ability to stand firm in the face of adversity, always with truth as a shield and hope as a guide. While the legal battle progressed, my relationship with Eleanor continued to consolidate, giving way to a more humane and authentic coexistence based on recovered respect and trust. This reality contrasted powerfully with the behavior of Liam and Chloe, who became increasingly isolated from the genuine family nucleus. Victory in court began to feel close, not as a trophy, but as a just recognition for someone who has not yielded an inch in the defense of their truth. The commitment and exhaustive preparation proved to be effective weapons to combat any attempt at manipulation. The moments of tension gave way to calm, and although many chapters remained to be resolved, the certainty of having done the right thing gave me an invaluable peace of mind. For the first time in a long time, I felt that the scales were beginning to tip towards the side of justice and respect. Thus, in the midst of that intense and emotionally charged journey, I came to understand that the true victory consists not only in winning a trial, but in recovering dignity and laying the foundation so that the future can be built without shadows or resentments. The legal fight was tough and draining, but also formative and revealing. It taught me that justice is a path that requires patience, perseverance, and above all, an unwavering faith in truth and in oneself. At the end of that stage, the family began to understand that respect and honesty are the indispensable pillars for any healthy coexistence, And that trust is a treasure that is earned and lost with actions and not with words. Time and justice began to put the pieces of the family puzzle in their place. And although the battle was not completely over, the light of hope shone brighter than ever. It was in that environment that I discovered that the family, although damaged, still had a chance to reemerge, and that I was still a fundamental actor in that rehabilitation. The arrival of my grandchildren to live with me marked a turning point in this complex plot I was living. Their presence filled every corner of the house with light and hope, and although the wounds were still bleeding, the innocence and joy of the children brought a renewing energy that helped me endure the hardships we were facing. Sam, my eldest grandson, and his younger sister Claire became the center of my world. Through their games, laughter, and the simple but powerful expression of affection, I remembered the importance of standing firm in my fight, not only for myself, but for the well-being and future of those little lives that trusted me without reservation. The dispute with Liam and Chloe, which until then had been a tough legal and emotional war, took on a new dimension when I was able to guarantee, thanks to judicial decisions, that the children would remain in my care. It was like recovering a piece of hope I thought was lost, and at the same time, the responsibility of offering them the love and protection they deserved. The court hearings were crucial to demonstrating that my grandchildren were better off in an environment of respect and tranquility, far from the tensions and conflicts that their own father and mother generated. We presented multiple testimonies and evidence showing that my home offered the most suitable conditions for their overall development. This process not only served to ensure their well-being, but was also a firm step to reclaim the dignity and authority that the law should always protect in such a delicate situation. It was a triumph filled with emotional significance because it reaffirmed that values and family love could prevail even in the midst of adversity. As this stage progressed, the bond between my grandchildren and me grew stronger every day. Together, we shared simple but profound moments, dinners, walks in the park, conversations at sunset. These moments became the perfect antidote to the wear and resentment that the family battle had left behind. Eleanor also became a fundamental support during this period, actively participating in the care and companionship of the children, demonstrating that, despite everything, the family could still be rebuilt from the purest and most essential foundations. Her involvement was a clear sign that love and respect could overcome old fractures. However, the war with Liam and Chloe did not cease, and they continued to try to maneuver to destabilize this new reality. They tried to discredit my parenting abilities and emotionally manipulate the children to wear me down. But each attack was met with firmness and evidence that countered their falsehoods. It was during one of these difficult moments that I understood that this struggle transcended the material or legal. It had to do with the very essence of being a human, a father and a grandfather, who defended with tooth and nail the respect and safety of his family. From that moment on, my determination became even more unwavering. In parallel, I strengthened communication with professionals specializing in child psychology, who worked with Sam and Claire to help them process the emotions arising from the family conflict. This support was essential to ensure that adversity did not translate into deep emotional wounds for them. On the other hand, I focused on building a stable home environment, full of love and routines that offered security and normalcy. The house, which had been the scene of disputes and distrust, began to transform into a refuge where the children could grow with joy and the values I always wanted to pass on to them. Meanwhile, justice continued its course and, in the face of the evidence presented, the balance began to shift in our hopeful direction. The legal protection granted to my grandchildren not only guaranteed their immediate well-being, but also sent a clear message to the entire family. Respect and truth would prevail over betrayal and manipulation. This progress was received with satisfaction by those who truly wanted to see a harmonious future for all of us, and with evident discontent by those who sought to take advantage of the circumstances for their own benefit. However, the strength and moral clarity that animated me gave way to the conviction of being on the right path. The love of my grandchildren, their trust, and their ability to illuminate even the darkest moments became the fuel that fed my daily struggle. Every smile, every hug reminded me of the importance of not giving in and continuing to defend not only a material heritage, but the essence of our family and the values that had to be kept alive. In this part of the story, I understood that the real victory would not only be in the courts, but in the possibility of offering a safe and loving home for the generations to come. That conviction pushed me to move forward with renewed strength, aware of the challenge, but also of the purpose. And so, between judicial decisions, affectionate care, and the delicate reconstruction of bonds, those months became a crucial stage that marked a before and after in our family life, laying the foundations for a new chapter that was yet to be written. The atmosphere in the family became even more tense when Chloe, Liam's wife, unleashed her last and cruelest strategy to destabilize me. Not content with legal maneuvers and attempts to strip me of control, she began to spread false accusations of psychological abuse against me, trying to tarnish my reputation and sow doubt both inside and outside the family nucleus. Her words became a poison that sought to wear down not only my emotional strength, but also the perception that others had of me. The rumor spread that I exercised excessive control and even mistreated my children and even my grandchildren. Distorted stories that lacked any foundation, but were repeated with enough insistence to generate unease and division. I quickly understood that this offensive not only attacked my honor, but also sought to weaken the solid legal foundation I had built with Anne and defended so vehemently. Therefore, I reinforced my defense by gathering testimonies from friends, neighbors, and professionals who could vouch for my responsible conduct and my commitment to family well-being. In addition, we commissioned a rigorous psychological report by independent specialists that certified that all family relationships, although tense, showed no signs of mistreatment or abusive behavior on my part. This document became key to dismantling the unfounded accusations Chloe had raised. Nevertheless, the emotional impact of these false accusations was deep and heartbreaking. People close to me began to look at me with suspicion. Some friendships drifted away, and within my own home, I felt a dense atmosphere being created, full of suspicion and uncomfortable silences. More than ever, I had to draw on an inner strength that sometimes seemed unattainable. However, this trial also made me value even more the support of those who stood firm by my side, especially Eleanor and my grandchildren, whose unconditional love was like a protective shield against the storm that was lashing me. Their presence reminded me that, although words can hurt, truth and affection are the pillars that sustain dignity. I decided not to respond to the provocations with more aggression, but to maintain a calm and firm stance, showing that not falling for emotional blackmail was the best defense. Anne advised me to avoid any direct confrontation with Chloe that could be manipulated against us, and to concentrate all our energies on gathering evidence and preparing the legal case. In parallel, the psychological toll was inevitable, and I had to rely on therapy and close friends who helped me cope with the tension. Accepting that the fight had an emotional cost was a necessary step to avoid being consumed by hatred or despair. Meanwhile, Chloe continued her efforts to manipulate different family members and third parties, using biased versions and lies to create a narrative where I appeared as the antagonist. But her every attempt was subtly countered with facts and testimonies that restored trust and debunked her stories. This stage became a battle of wills and a defense of the truth, where the toll was great. But my convictions and respect for my values did not allow me to give up. Every small victory in court was a light that guided me to continue, and every hug from my grandchildren was a reminder of why this fight was worthwhile. Over time, I understood that the real victory lay not only in winning the trial, but in maintaining integrity in the face of adversity and in strengthening relationships with those who truly mattered. I did not allow the poison of false accusations to corrupt my essence, nor my ability to love and care for my family. As the truth began to shine more clearly, Chloe gradually began to disappear from our environment, her role in the family dissolving amidst discussions and internal confessions that revealed her own defeats and regrets. Her departure, though silent, was a necessary relief to restore the peace we so longed for. This silent victory was a step forward in family reconstruction, a triumph beyond the courts, a reaffirmation of the power of love, truth, and patience on the path to healing. Although the road was arduous and full of obstacles, today I can look back and appreciate that even in the worst storms, the light of justice and dignity always finds its way, and that in the end, a man's strength is measured not only by his material achievements, but by his ability to keep truth and respect intact despite adversity. This dark chapter of my life taught me that truth does not fear the shadows, and that although some seek to destroy it with lies, there are always those willing to defend it with courage and conviction. It was a tough test, but essential to strengthen the structure of my life and my family. The court's ruling was a moment filled with a deep emotion that flooded my soul and changed the course of that family battle. After months of agonizing waiting, the verdict finally came down in my favor, recognizing the legitimacy of my claims and the invalidity of the unfounded and malicious accusations that had been leveled against me. This sentence not only guaranteed the protection of my assets, but also restored my dignity and provided security to those who truly deserved a stable home, especially my grandchildren. Upon hearing the news, I felt the weight of the accumulated injustice begin to fade, and a mix of relief and satisfaction took hold of me. Justice had decided to respect the truth and protect the family nucleus that some had tried to fragment with lies and tricks. It was a moment of victory, not only personal, but also symbolic, a triumph of respect over greed and of truth over falsehood. Chloe disappeared from our lives shortly after the verdict. Her presence, which had once been a constant source of conflict and manipulation, became a distant echo in our family's memory. Her departure, though silent, was a necessary respite, a new space in which peace began to germinate. Without grudges, but with the clarity that justice imposed as the only possible path. Liam, for his part, faced the challenge of rethinking his life and reconsidering his priorities. The consequences of his actions forced him into a deep introspection, where he had to take responsibility for his mistakes and find a way to repair the damage caused. Although the path to reconciliation was not immediate or simple, the process of reflection he went through opened a door for a possible personal and family reconstruction. The house, which for years had been marked by confrontations and distrust, began to become a home again. The atmosphere calmed down, and respect began to replace those latent tensions that seemed unbreakable. I could breathe the tranquility that only comes from knowing that justice has been served, and that finally bonds can be rebuilt on more solid and authentic foundations. In this new cycle, the days took on a different rhythm. The daily tasks shared with my daughter Eleanor and my grandchildren became the center of my existence. The simple moments, family meals, walks, and quiet conversations were the sign that there was still hope, and that the family bond, though damaged, could be renewed and strengthened. Despite everything I had been through, the experience taught me that the fight for respect and dignity is a path worth taking, even if it is fraught with obstacles. Justice is not always swift or simple, but when it stands firm, it opens the doors for truth and honesty to prevail. Today, as I remember everything I went through, I recognize that this stage was painful, but necessary to transform a broken dynamic into an opportunity to grow and heal. The battle was not only for material goods, but for recovering the sense of belonging and love in a fragmented family. Liam began to rebuild his life, one step at a time, taking on commitments he had previously avoided. His process was slow and demanding, but essential so that one day he could be part of a healthier and more respectful coexistence. Knowing that his decisions had consequences allowed him to understand the importance of valuing what truly matters. Meanwhile, living with Eleanor and the grandchildren reinforced the commitment I had to keep the legacy of love and justice alive in our family. The house ceased to be just a property and became the tangible space where respect, solidarity, and renewed hope are cultivated. This new stage is the manifestation that, even in the darkest moments, light can emerge if one has the strength to resist, the wisdom to act with justice, and the will to transform pain into a lesson. Herein lies the true value of life, in maintaining integrity and in never losing faith in the possibility of a new beginning. Thus, the story that began with betrayal and deep pain transformed into a path towards reconstruction, where the wounds, though visible, began to heal with time, patience, and a sincere desire to change. This experience showed that although not all bonds are repaired, there is always the possibility of finding new paths to move forward with dignity and love. The scar left by the family storm did not disappear overnight. The years of conflict and pain left deep marks that are not erased by sentences or resolutions. However, the final stage of this long journey was marked by a slow process of reconstruction and reconciliation, where respect and the will to heal began to prevail over resentment and division. We lived through moments of imperfect encounters, sincere talks, and above all, a patience that became essential to rebuild the broken bonds. Eleanor was a fundamental pillar in this task. Her constant support and her real commitment to the family made it easier to open paths that previously seemed closed forever. Daily life with my grandchildren gave us moments of pure joy and hope. Those small moments when laughter and play brought life back to a home that had been mired in tension and distrust. Every hug, every gesture of affection became a balm that helped heal the invisible wounds that time had not been able to erase. Mutual respect was gradually established as the basis of this new stage. And although differences persisted, we learned to live together without them becoming an insurmountable obstacle. We relearned to listen to each other, to value opinions, and to make decisions that sought the common good above individual interests. Liam, after a long period of reflection and change, began to present himself with a different attitude. With effort, he tried to repair past mistakes and express a genuine desire to rectify the damage caused. It was not an easy or immediate path, but the will to change was a significant step in the right direction. Chloe, although she had physically disappeared, remained a memory that marked the importance of learning from the consequences of actions and from the wounds that unbridled ambition can generate. Her absence, though painful, allowed the family to breathe cleaner air and to focus on reconstruction and growth. Throughout this process, we realize that the family, with all its complexity and contradictions, is a space of constant learning. We recognize that true love is not perfect or unconditional without effort, but is built day by day with respect, understanding, and the willingness to forgive and move forward. The values I always wanted to pass on began to gain strength again. Honesty, loyalty, solidarity, and above all, a commitment to the well-being of all members. These principles once again shone like beacons that guide and protect our common path. The house, once a witness to so many disputes, was once again filled with life, light, and hope. Every corner now reflected the story of resilience and overcoming that we had built together, a space where peace and love could flourish again. The legacy I built was not only based on material things, but on the strength with which I faced every challenge and on the ability to remain true to my convictions, even when it seemed that all was lost. I learned that true wealth lies in dignity, respect, and a family rebuilt on solid foundations. Looking back, I understand that this experience transformed me profoundly, teaching me to be wiser, more patient, and more sensitive to human complexities. Justice and forgiveness coexisted on this path, allowing me to close cycles and open new chapters full of possibilities. This conclusion does not represent an end, but the beginning of a new stage where every day is an opportunity to build, to love, and to continue learning. The story I share is that of a man who, despite betrayal and pain, chose to rise with dignity and fight for truth, justice, and hope. With the certainty that true bonds can be reborn from the ashes, I conclude this account, knowing that the future, though uncertain, is full of possibilities for those who maintain the strength and faith to move forward. Thus ends this family saga, not with a perfect ending, but with a possible and human one, where transformation and reconstruction are the greatest victories that can be achieved in life. If you like this story, give the video a like, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. To hear the next story, click on the box to the left. Thanks for watching.